Welcome to the discussion, everyone. Today we're diving deep into the evolution of opposition politics and its influence on democracy in Cambodia. It's fascinating how the gradual emergence of the opposition party, particularly the CNRP, has shaped the political space despite so many challenges.
Absolutely. It's really intriguing to see how the opposition, especially after merging from SRP and HRP, has managed to claim its space in such a tightly controlled environment.
Right. And what really stands out is how this research uses a party and democratic linkage model, the one by Dalton, Farrell, and McAllister, to assess different dimensions like the campaign process, participation, ideology, representative functions, and policy influence.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was struck by how these linkages are evaluated. For example, the campaign and participation linkages are rated as strong, scoring a 4 on that 5-point scale. Meanwhile, the representative linkage is low, and ideology and policy linkages come off as moderate. Isn't that a bit surprising, given the challenges the opposition faces in Cambodia?
It is surprising, yet, understandable. I mean, think about it. Cambodia's elections, starting from 1993 up through the local ones in 2017, have always been held in a constrained environment. Even though the opposition has made gains, like that 44% in the local vote back in 2017, the overall democratic influence still remains moderate.
Yep, right. And when we look at the campaign linkage, it's clear that the CNRP exercises strong internal control. They control candidate selection, sort out the nomination process, and even manage their campaign finance independently with contributions from members and supporters abroad. That, to me, speaks volumes about their organizational strength in that area.
Yeah, exactly. The process they use is very structured, starting at the commune level, involving multiple committees, and only very rarely does it go to an open poll. It really shows that the party, while operating under restrictive state laws, still manages to maintain a firm grip on their candidate selection.
That's key. One thing I'm curious about is the participation linkage. I mean, voter turnout in local elections used to dip over time, but then we see that spike up to 90% in 2017. What do you think contributed to that dramatic increase?
Oh, good question. It's a mix of factors, really. The opposition, especially through the unity of SRP and HRP merging into CNRP, managed to harness not only the aspirations for change, but also to mobilize voters through active outreach like public forums and social media campaigns.
Right, exactly. That makes sense. Social media, particularly Facebook in Cambodia, seems to be a powerful tool. But there's also that structural element, the targeting of rural communities and local issues. It shows that geography and local dynamics played a huge role in their ability to rally people.
Absolutely. Despite all the technical challenges, the party leveraged local grassroots mobilization. Even with issues like voter registration irregularities, they made sure to address concerns like missing names from the polling list, which, as we know, happened in previous elections.
Exactly. Moving over to the ideological linkage, it's interesting that this was rated as only moderate. Given the heavy reliance on slogans like change, do you think the party has effectively communicated its policy differences?
That's a great point. The study indicates that while the opposition, particularly CNRP, has been very effective in rallying voters with the promise of change, the actual ideological messaging, that is, the detailed policy platforms, hasn't really resonated at a deep level with a broad spectrum of voters.
Exactly. It appears that many Cambodians don't distinguish ideological differences so much. The survey findings even showed that only a tiny percentage of voters could articulate specific policy differences between parties.
Right. It's like the focus became less about a rigorous ideological debate and more, about dissatisfaction with the status quo. People voted for change. Not necessarily because CNRP's policies were perfectly aligned with their own, but because they wanted an alternative to the ruling CPP.
Speaking of alternatives, the representative linkage is a critical area where CNRP seems to struggle. The study rated it low. The party won a significant portion of the vote in 2013 and even formed a substantial opposition presence. Yet, when it came to being accountable and negotiating with the ruling party, it hit every roadblock, didn't it?
Exactly. There's a bit of a paradox here. On one hand, the voters clearly showed support for CNRP, with figures coming close to parity with the CPP in parliamentary seats. On the other hand, due to electoral irregularities, political deadlock, and then the subsequent violent crackdown and, political deals like the reformed National Election Committee, the representative linkage remains low.
And that reformed National Election Committee, while a positive gesture in principle, doesn't fully encapsulate the need for deeper accountability. The fact that some changes in Parliament were achieved through protests and demonstrations also highlights the struggle for genuine representativeness.
Right. And there's that element of protest. The daily demonstrations in Freedom Park, for instance, representing the people's attempt to hold the government accountable. But, as we saw, the eventual crackdown and the deal to release opposition lawmakers really underscored the limitations of the representative linkage.
True. Now, the policy linkage seems like the final frontier in this discussion. CNRP had some bold 7-point policy proposals covering everything from pensions to minimum wage adjustments, and it appears some of these policies did see real changes after the elections.
Yes, exactly. In the garment sector alone, minimum wages increased significantly, from around 61 USD pre-election to 153 USD by 2017, and then even further in 2018. That's an impressive turnaround that many attribute, at least partly, to the pressure from the opposition.
Right, indeed. But then, there's the flip side. While these changes in wages, healthcare, and public service salaries are meaningful, the overall policy linkage is still just moderate because of persistent challenges like corruption, political intimidation, and the attempted weakening of CNRP through legal and coercive means.
Exactly. It's like a half door opens. Some reforms happen, yet key structural issues remain unresolved. The government, reacting to losing votes, implements those visible, mild reforms rather than addressing deeper issues of governance and rule of law.
I agree. And we can't ignore the political context here. CNRP leaders being imprisoned, party law amendments crafted to ban leading figures like Sam Rainsy. That's a heavy blow to the representative and overall democratic process.
Absolutely. These actions not only affect the party's operational capacity, but also send a strong signal about the state's unwillingness to tolerate a robust opposition. But even with that, the research suggests that despite these factors, the overall influence of the opposition remains at a moderate level, with an average score of about 3.2 on the 5-point scale.
Right, that's quite telling. Yes, and that moderate score tells us that while there has been progress and some impact on the democratic process, there's still a long road ahead for Cambodia. It's like the opposition is doing its best under quite constrained circumstances.
Exactly. The party's strengths, particularly in mobilizing voters and controlling its campaign, are notable. But the challenges in fully representing the people's will and ensuring a transformative policy impact remain a significant gap.
Spot on. One interesting angle here is the interplay between domestic factors and international pressures. The article points out that international linkages are low when it comes to inducing democratization, yet international community support has at times given the opposition a bit of leeway.
Yes, that's very important. International attention, say from rights organizations or even foreign governments, plays a role in checking the domestic authoritarian grip, but it's limited in its effect when the internal structures are so robustly controlled by the ruling party.
And that brings us back to the question of how much power an opposition can really have in a system designed to limit it. The moderate score essentially sums up the tug-of-war between the opposition's aspirations and the ruling party's entrenched power.
Totally. It's like, imagine trying to run a marathon with a weight tied to your ankle. You make progress, but you're almost always hindered by that extra burden. The opposition in Cambodia faces continual suppression despite having potential.
True. However, what I find intriguing is that while the opposition shows promise in mobilizing people and in campaigning, it still must overcome the challenge of actually converting that into effective governance and policy change. It's a nuanced picture, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's, almost a double-edged sword. They've demonstrated organizational strengths, but the system's inherent bias, like the manipulation of electoral laws and media control, creates a bottleneck that restricts any transformation into tangible democratic progress.
Right, exactly. And, even on the policy front, while we see some achievements like wage increases and expanded health insurance, there's the looming issue of non-policy factors like corruption and the rule of law. These are areas where reform has been hesitant at best.
Yeah, it's like implementing a new operating system on an old computer. You might see a boost in performance here and there, but the fundamental architecture remains flawed. The moderate influence is reflective of that.
That's a good analogy. Now, I'm curious. Given all this, do you think the future for democracy in Cambodia hinges entirely on improving these linkages? Or is there, some external dynamic that might tip the scales?
That's a tough question. I believe it's a bit of both. On one hand, strengthening these democratic linkages internally, better representative mechanisms, truly competitive elections, could gradually foster more accountability. On the other, any transformative change might require, a significant external push or change in the political landscape.
Right, that's very plausible. It seems then that while the progress is incremental, the overall impact of the opposition has been moderate. And as one of the key scholars observed, for all the promises of change, there remains this underlying structural constraint that prevents a fully vibrant democratic process.
Exactly. Despite the challenges, it's important to note that these efforts by the opposition, like mobilizing voters, orchestrating a controlled campaign, and even influencing public policy reforms, do contribute in their own way, even if it's just a moderate influence overall.
Absolutely. And that, in a nutshell, is the crux of the analysis. The opposition in Cambodia, represented by the CNRP, manages to inject a spirit of change and some policy impacts despite a systemic structure that is heavily skewed. It's a story of resilience and, cautious progress.
Exactly. A nuanced picture of moderate influence. Thanks for joining in this conversation. It's been a rich dive into how opposition parties can, even under constrained conditions, stir the pot of democracy.
Thanks for the engaging discussion. It really shows that in politics, sometimes even a moderate impact can be the first step toward larger change.